Hi, my name is Steve Jackson, and welcome to a brief tour of my home layout that I call the Enigmatic line. As you can see, I have the layout right behind me now, and that's been the case through all of my personal and work-related meetings throughout the pandemic. Although this is a case based out of necessity, because this was the only quiet place I had in the house to set up a home office, having my office in the train room has really been a conversation starter throughout the pandemic. And that's why Razor asked me if I'd be willing to talk about my layout a little bit because he had seen this during meetings we have for the N-Rail board. So I live in the Washington, D.C. suburbs, and I've been in Scalar for almost 40 years. There was an overview of my history in model railroading in the May and June N-Rail newsletters. So if you're interested in more of my background, you can access that newsletter from the member section of nrail.org. Over the years, I built a series of layouts ranging from simple 2 foot by 4 foot sheet of plywood with an oval and some sidings on it, to an N-TRAK-based layout in my basement, as well as shelf style layouts that are built on the wall and encircling a room in the basement. But particularly when my kids were little, they used to love to go downstairs and play trains with me, and they very much enjoyed each of the layouts that we had over the years. But my current layout's based on T-TRAK modules. The space where my current layout is once housed a shelf style layout. However, I was making very slow progress with the layout because I kept spending most of my time working on my T-TRAK modules. And eventually I started to play around with the idea of how would I fill the space that I have available to me with a modular layout. And the tipping point really came as I had this space set up and I'd measured it and figured out what size tables I needed. And I owned a couple of standard folding 6 foot tables that I used for essentially work sessions, being able to set up my modules just to test them. And so I had a couple 6 foot tables, but that really didn't fit what I needed in this particular space. So that tipping point came when I was looking on Craigslist one time for folding tables and found a guy that was selling a whole array of tables. He had a business where he closes down office buildings. And so he had a bunch of surplus tables that came out of some building that he closed. And so he had 4 foot, 5 foot, 6 foot, and 8 foot tables. So I went and kind of sketched out, actually in Visio, but I sketched out this space and set out the tables as what configuration we would need and what tables I would need. And then I went out to that guy's shop and purchased all the tables that I needed to set up this C-shaped space in the basement. So all the tables have the same height, they're all the same style, and then they fit into this space very nicely with very little gaps in between them. So I have a fair number of sort of show-ready T-TRAK modules that I try to keep packed up on a shelf in the closet around the corner because I don't really want to have to be in a situation where I have to tear apart my home layout in order to go to a show. And so this means that essentially my home layout is perpetually a workbench. The modules that are here are typically the ones that are in work that I'm still doing things to and still making progress with. Sometimes very slow progress, but progress nonetheless. And so this layout constantly changes, hence the name Enigmatic. Is I have a lot of change that goes on, and I'm constantly pulling modules in and out of it as time goes along. And some of the modules that are here I actually will take to shows, so I might take them out temporarily just to take them to a show. Prior to the pandemic, this layout was a dog bone in the shape of a C, like a capital letter C. But right now it's actually an L shape because part of the C I had to take off in order to put this desk space in. I've got a couple of diagrams you're seeing on the screen that sort of highlight some of the designs that I've had over the years and give you a sense for what I've been able to do with T-TRAK to build a very flexible, different, and dynamic layout depending on my mood and what I wanted to really be doing with the layout down in the basement. The end loops on my module, the dog bones, are based on a design that I found called Centered Balloon Track with Siding. It's a track plan that's been posted to the T-TRAK Wikidot site that Vic McT from North Texas provides for the rest of the T-TRAK community. And I modified that plan slightly in a couple of ways. One is I wanted to use number 6 turnouts, not because I like them more, but simply because I happen to have those on hand. So I didn't want to have to spend any new money to buy tracks since I already had something. So I modified it to be able to use the number 6 turnouts, but retain the 33 millimeter spacing that we're accustomed to. And then I also adjusted the module because I didn't want to have a whole entire balloon track. I wanted to be able to extend and collapse that balloon with other straight modules. So I built really what I call the balloon throat. So it's just the first part that spreads in half, and then I use a 180 or two corners on the end in order to make the end of the loop. When I had it in a C shape, I actually had the balloons extended so that I had a long siding there that I could park a train on the inside track and then use the outside track to run the through traffic through. Because of the way I have the dog bones set up, the front and the back track, I've got double crossover so I can move between the rails. And in order to do that, then the balloon tracks need auto reversers on them. So I do use Digitrak's AR1 DCC auto reversing controllers. And I've got one set up on both the inside and outside of each of the end loops. And the idea there being that if I extend that balloon pretty far and use that as a passing siding, I might have trains coming out of the loops at the same time. So I'd need to be able to auto reverse both of the two tracks. So I've got those two tracks set up separately. So there's two auto reversers on each end, one for each of the two tracks on the balloons. And as you can see, the balloon tracks are definitely a work in progress, or the balloon throats. And they've got some basic scenery. I have a sense for what I want to do, but I just haven't had the time to get those set up. And my wife's family is Czech. She was born here, but their heritage is Czech. And so we've gone over there, and I've really enjoyed riding the rails. In the Czech Republic, they use the trains extensively for travel around the country, and it's a very affordable and reliable way to get from place to place. And so, unfortunately, there's very little Czech equipment that's been produced over the years, but I've tried to pick up things when they're offered. And when I could afford to do so, they're often quite expensive, but I pick up the pieces I can when I can. And as a result, though, I've been able to pull together a pretty decent Czech freight and passenger roster. Since I had Czech equipment now, I thought it was time to build some Czech-themed modules as well. And the most recent project I have is the inside corner that you kind of see over my shoulder here, and it's made up of a double at the end, a triple, a inside corner, and then one more triple here on the end. And that large L shape is four modules, and those four modules can be reconfigured so long as you have the two end pieces. You could remove the two middle ones if you want because they have the same track configuration each time, or you can reorder them if you want, or use just two or the three of the four pieces if you wanted. And so it gives me flexibility. I've been adding scenery as well as that module set I've been including lights on, just 'cause I thought it was kind of fun. Really was led by the fact that my wife years ago had found it's a very traditional Czech style lamppost that they have. They're about this tall and in scale, but it's a lamppost that they have all over the Czech Republic in different parks and city streets that you see. And it's just a unique thing to them. And so she found some years ago, so I wanted to include the lamppost. And while I was at it, I was like, well, if I've got the lamppost, which happens to be functional LED, since I had that, why not power it? And if I'm going to power that, why not power some other stuff? So several of the buildings on the modules behind me actually have lights inside of them, or lights under the awnings more often than not as well, so that sort of it exemplifies at night. Business is closed, but you have the loading dock lit up or other areas lit up based on leveraging those lights that are up inside of the loading dock areas on those buildings. And on one end of the layout, I actually have one of the original modules that I built. It's a 180, so it's the same as two corners. It's called Wandering Creek, and it's been a hit at the shows over the years because it includes tunnel on each end. They're very short tunnels, but it still doesn't matter. The kids and even adults love to seem to watch the trains coming in and out of the tunnel. It adds a little mystery to it, and it's particularly being an end cap, the 180. Otherwise, it seems like a really tight corner, but you kind of have a train pop out of a tunnel, do a quick corner, and then pop back into a tunnel to get out. So that's been a module that I've been around. I've had that for almost 20 years now. And then the other end loop, so I talked about having the two balloon throats. The other throat that I have leverages two corners. One's called Camping Corner, which was built by one of a former friend of mine who passed away, Nick Sklias, and it was part of Camping Scene. He had a corner and a straight module, and another member and I sort of split that set up, and I got the corner one. And I always enjoyed that one because it has a horse scene along the edge of it. There's some horse riders along the edge of the track. My daughter loves to ride horses, and so it was something that I thought she would really enjoy, and I just liked it. It made me think so. It makes me think of her. And so I have that module over there as well. And then next to it is a module that was a Kato corner module kit, that new kit that came out with Woodland Scenics. And it's one of those kits that I wanted to experiment with. And I've got it, it's in a very similar scene, but it's not finished yet. It needs some trees and things added to it, but it's intended to be a mate to that. So the two of those together can create kind of that 180, those two corners together on the end for a consistent scene with a little hillside on it behind those horses. And then in order to be able to move between the two tracks, I mentioned earlier, I have a double crossover. I've got one of my original modules. It's called Peaceful Crossing, and it features a Kato double crossover. And it's been extremely reliable over the years. I've had great luck with it. I actually modified it originally. There's information on the T-TRAK Wikidot site that about how I modified it. I actually added some wires inside of it in order to make sure that it passed electricity through it, because there's a sort of a quirk with the way that they're built. Um, and then one thing to note is that module, because it's one of my original ones, the original standard called for modules that were 308 millimeters long, so 2 millimeters shorter than the 310 of the track, and then 210 millimeters deep. That's about 8¼ inches, and that was driven by the size of an A4 sheet of paper. And so A4 sheets of paper are 210 millimeters deep. And so this is one of my original modules, so it's built to that original standard. That module, along with my two junction modules, the original junction modules, as well as several of my other modules, were all a part of the first T-TRAK convention. There's a plaque on the front of that module for that. And that first T-TRAK convention was held in conjunction with the Capital Limited 2004 In-Scale East Convention in Chantilly, Virginia. That was held in August of 2004. We had a large contingent of T-TRAK modules there. The intent there was not to be a world's largest layout, although it may have been because that was so early in the life of T-TRAK, but it was, the largest layout was only 2 tables long. But we did have lots of other individual and singular layouts, and Lee Monaco Fitzgerald, when she was still alive, she was the coordinator for that show and set that up at the Capital Limited convention. So I participated there with several modules that I had. I do power my modules with Digitrak's DCC system. I keep the command station and the PM42 in a wooden box underneath the layout. The box is built for me by a friend of mine, Jim Davis. I've got a duplex radio receiver, so that's the Digitrak's UR92, as well as several UP5 panels around. The UP5s allow me to plug throttles in anywhere I need them. And I find that it's just really handy to have those available as often as possible. Anytime I build a module set that may have more than a couple of modules in the set, I'll make sure one of those has a UP5, because I'm a member of the Northern Virginia N-TRAK Club. And our club uses Digitrak's equipment, so it's just great to have those UP5s built right into the module, so it's very easy to wire them up when we're setting up the layout and ensure that we have LocoNet connection all over the place. So I've really enjoyed giving you this brief overview of my layout, the Enigmatic line. I enjoy the dynamic nature of using T-TRAK modules for my home layout because I can change it whenever I want to. There are certainly certain compromises to using T-TRAK for my home layout. However, I feel like the compromises are great for me. It gives me everything that I really need, the flexibility. I can run operations on it because I have sidings that are functional on most of my modules, so I can actually do operational stuff when I want to. And then the fact that I can really change the layout up. So over the course of several months, it can look quite different. And so that to me is really great because it's ever changing. I don't ever get bored of the layout because I can always just change it again. So take care, and thanks very much for tuning in.